Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So the revolving doors of Prime Minister May's new cabinet have been turning yet again. Of the more senior roles in cabinet, out goes Michael Gove at Justice, Nicky Morgan at Education and Oliver Letwin from the Cabinet Office. Also axed our Work and Pension Secretary, Stephen Crabb, who says he's going in the best interests of his family, and Culture Secretary John Whittingdale. Liz Truss gets promoted to Justice Secretary, Justin Greening to Education, Andrea Leadsom, who so dramatically pulled out of the Conservative leadership race on Monday, gets the Environment Brief. Theresa May keeps Jeremy Hunt at Health, but demotes other ministers like Business Secretary Sajid Javid to lesser roles, but within Cabinet. Our political editor Gary Gibbon has been following the day's machinations.
Back into Downing Street after overnighting at her London home and a morning in the Prime Minister's Commons office, sacking a swathe of Cabinet ministers. Theresa May sacked Michael Gove, along with the Education Secretary Nicky Morgan, the Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Letwin. She'd already sacked George Osborne last night. Two other ministers left the cabinet after conversations with Mrs May. Michael Gove, home earlier than usual on a working day,
Have you blown it, Mr. Gove?
was told by Theresa May that MPs had impressed upon her the importance of loyalty and that a stint on the back benches could help to demonstrate some loyalty. The two have often disagreed fiercely. Friends said the exchanges had a moralistic tone.
I'm delighted to be appointed as Secretary of State for Justice.
Michael Gove's old job has gone to Liz Truss.
Very good.
Her old job at Environment and Farming has gone to the leadership contender who bowed out, Andrea Leadsom. She will now be responsible for devising how Britain replaces EU farm subsidies. When she was campaigning for a Leave victory, Mrs Leadsom told farmers they'd keep the subsidies in the short term. Arrived for Theresa May at the door of number 10. Some in Westminster sensed the new Prime Minister had overseen the death of the Cameron set. The Osborne set too. Now they point out a formidable backbench force. Theresa May has absorbed the Department for Energy and Climate Change into a new enlarged business department, along with her emphasis on energy bills being cheaper, making some wonder whether Theresa May's that interested in green issues. And there's also an air of foreboding around the aid agenda. The appointment of Priti Patel as Secretary of State for International Development, a department she suggested only 3 years ago should be abolished. The Culture Secretary, John Whittingdale, was clapped out of the Culture Department after his sacking. Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, heard reports he was being sacked, so was pleasantly surprised to stay in his job and tweeted his delight. Boris Johnson got the worst international response probably any new Foreign Secretary has received. As he was addressing officials in the Foreign Office, a reminder of the still open wounds of the referendum. The French Foreign Minister said Boris Johnson had lied to a lot of the British people, and now he has his back against the wall. The Independent published a map of countries in the world Boris Johnson has insulted in his columns. One old column surfaced showing he'd called for Iran to be allowed its own nuclear bomb. Today, in his first press release as Foreign Secretary, he declared the Iran nuclear deal signed a year ago an historic breakthrough. A big unknown still is who, if anyone, has the real power amongst the three Leave supporters now charged with aspects of European relations.
We will be working very closely, as you can imagine, with the new departments for international trade and for the withdrawal from the EU, and they will be borrowing some of our staff as is only proper.
In this new role.
One of the ministers borrowing his top people, David Davis, the Secretary of State for the new department, negotiating Britain's exit. Was he looking for new premises or just the ministerial car? And will Theresa May really cede power on this central project to her underlings?
Well, our political editor Gary Gibbon is in Downing Street. Gary, we seem to be seeing quite a big change in the way departments are kind of put together. But this was going to be a unity cabinet.
Well, just on the departments, one of the most interesting things here is what's happening on Europe. Where does the power really lie between the Foreign Office, the department that David Davis heads, and the Liam Fox Trade Department. By the way, David Davis and Liam Fox, over the years, it has been said by many close friends, loathe each other and find it very difficult to share a space. And somehow those three departments have got to sort of knit together, and power's got to rest somewhere. You can't help thinking that at the end of the day it's going to rest very much in number 10 Downing Street itself, but all sorts of potential for tension there. And one other point on the tension, there's been a wee Twitter spat just this evening. The French ambassador to the United States saying, "Hoy, Britain, you can't actually negotiate trade deals until you've left the European Union. That would be a breach of treaties." A moot point whether signing them or negotiating them is actually the breach of treaty, but you can see the sort of troubled areas that lie ahead.
However, Mrs May's going in the opposite direction, going off to Scotland, right?
Well, I was going to talk next about the unity point, which is something that a lot of people have noted Theresa May was saying she was going to try and bring to this cabinet. And there are people around George Osborne, David Cameron, who are feeling very bruised this evening, feeling that they have been identified and, as a clique, as it were, cleared out. Now, that's not entirely true when you look down the list and some gossip you hear about stuff that's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think they're being utterly cleared out, but they feel they are. And one of them said, this is no way a unity cabinet, and she, meaning Theresa May, doesn't have the mandate, implying that it was George Osborne and David Cameron who did all the hard work to get the mandate. Another supporter of that clique, as it were, said, we have all the talent on the back benches now. We'll be back soon. So as you can see, rather like a budget that looks quite fresh and promising for a few minutes, a reshuffle, a new administration, and can go sour quite quickly.
Gosh, it sounds as if the bloodletting isn't over yet.
It may well not be. But the point you raised there on Scotland, as far as we know, Theresa May is off to Scotland tomorrow, we think. And interestingly, when you talk to people who've spoken to her privately over the years, you hear that she was less than impressed by the way David Cameron conducted the 2014 referendum in Scotland, thought he'd given away too much ground to the SNP, and may even be more reluctant than David Cameron to cede any other referendum in the future. That's not going to be an entirely straightforward visit.
Gary Gibbon in Downing Street.
Well, that's Channel 4 News.
Before we go, we leave with you images of all the men sacked by Britain's newly anointed second female Prime Minister. Good evening.
Good evening.
Morning.
Well, I should say afternoon. See you after lunch.